This interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. The veteran's name is Fernand Medeiros. He served in Darby's Special Forces in World War II. He achieved the rank of Private First Class. We're recording this on August 23rd, 2014. I'm Will Hines and I'm conducting this interview. No relation. So, Mr. Medeiros, could you kind of get started on what you wanted to tell me about the speeches that you've given in the past?
Okay. I think it was June 5th, 2011, that I had the honor of having a bridge named Fernand Medeiros Bridge POW. And at that time, I said that we all know a bridge is connecting 2 points. And we all are going to cross bridges in our lifetime, over land, sea, and air. Well, my bridging started in 1943 when I was drafted in the U.S. Army, and I received my training down here in Camp Croft, Spartanburg, and also I received further training at the Fort Rucker, I guess it's called Rucker Field now. And then from there I was bridged by train to Norfolk, Virginia, where I boarded a convoy going to, by sea of course, to Iran, Africa, and from there I went to Tunisia, and from Tunisia I went to Naples, and that's where I joined the Rangers. And at that time we went through 2 or 3 weeks of training before I went into combat. And at that time, when I went into combat, our mission was to eliminate some gun placements that was preventing the Allied troops from moving forward. And then I was wounded in action. I was 12 miles behind German lines at the time. After I was wounded, I went in, they took me to a hospital in Rome, and after a day or two in the hospital, they sent me to a staging area where they had a number of Allied POWs. And a day or two after the staging area, they put us in cattle cars, more or less, and they really packed us in like cattle. And from there, we went up to Moosburg, Germany, to a camp there called Stalag 7A. That was a distribution type camp where the Army went to different camps, the Air Force went to different camps, and so forth. After a time period there, they put us in cattle cars again, and they shipped us up by train up to Neustadt, Germany, which is part of Poland today. We had gone to Czechoslovakia and so on. And we were at a camp called Stalag 2B. And after a period of time in Stalag 2B, myself and 14 other Americans were shipped out on a farm way up in East Prussia, a village called Stoke. And we were up there to do farm work. And I ended up working in the dairy farm, and I learned how to milk cows. And I used to milk about 25 cows a day. And at least out in the farm we had potatoes to eat, more food to eat than as was in a camp. Because in a camp, we had 2 watery meals with a slice of bread. So we out in the farm, we were fortunate to I could drink all the milk I wanted and so on. And at that time, we used to get a Red Cross parcel of 11 pounds if the Germans didn't confiscate it. And in this box, there was a D-bar, 5-pack of cigarettes, oil bran, cubes of sugar, and they had Nescafe, a coffee, and powdered milk, and a can of beef or beans and so forth. And that kind of helped us in our diet up there because I would, with another buddy of mine who recently passed away, we put our food together, and I didn't smoke, and he only smoked about 3 packs out of the 10, combined 10. And we would trade for eggs or bread, real bread, and so forth. Well, this lasted about a year till January of 45. And at the end of January, for some reason or other, as the Russians were advancing, they moved all the POWs westward towards the American lines. And this march lasted from the end of January to our liberation, which was in May. And we had covered better than 500 miles in one of the worst winters that Europe had. And some of the fellows never did make it. And also we were straight at times. The Allies thought we were German troops moving westward. But from there, I was liberated May 1st, I guess it was. Then I acted as a translator for some of the troops up in that northern sector. In other words, we ended up between Hanover, Hamburg, and Lubeck. And we were led by the 7th Armored Division that was supporting the British troop in that northern sector of the war, Germany and so forth. After we were liberated, by the way, we were still straight even at the billets where we were building, housing where we had barns and so forth. And we finally had to paint some rocks, POW, and finally things went straight. And then after I was liberated by the 7th Armored Division, I can remember eating a nice white piece of bread. And I can remember my mother saying to me when we were kids, said, someday you're going to wish that you had that bread because we had wasted the bread to throw it. Right. From there, they flew me through the part of the POW to Camp Lucky Strike in Le Havre, France. And there we received AA rations, and where our stomachs had shrunk so much from not eating proper food and so on, some of the guys overate, they really got sick. What I did was I ate just a little and took food to my camp, to the camp. And after a week at the hospital camp there, they put us on a ship, England troop ship, and they shipped us again back to the United States. And I spent my 22nd birthday on a boat in the middle of Atlantic Ocean.
Wow.
And we were lucky. The ship landed in Taunton. And from Taunton, they shipped us over to Camp Miles Standish, which was, well, I should say the ship landed in Boston, but then we were transferred to Camp Miles Standish in Taunton. And when I got at Taunton there, at Camp Miles Standish, I told the officer in charge I'd like to get either a one-day pass or three-day pass because I want to go home because I lived right in Taunton there. And he says, I can't give you a pass because we're on the work. So I told him, I said, you know something, sir? I don't care. Even if I go AOL, I'm going out. I'm sneaking out of this camp tonight because I haven't seen my parents for over 2 years. He looked at me and he says, what outfit were you in? I told him I was in the Rangers. And he just laughed. And he said, well, okay, I'll cover you for 24 hours. So I snuck out of camp, I went home and I saw my parents.
Wow.
And then I came back, we went to Fort Devens. And from Fort Devens, I was given a 65-day leave. And by the way, I had lost about 30 pounds. And was mother's cooking. I put that on in no time. And then from there we went to Lake Saranac Lake for reorientation classes and so forth. And from there I went to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and I was there for about a month before I was discharged, November 9th. And after that, I went to school, Milwaukee School of Engineering.
Wow.
Got my associate degree and so forth. And I registered in Massachusetts and New Hampshire as a professional engineer to practice engineering. And also I had construction management license in Massachusetts. And I also spent 4 terms in the city council, and I was quite active in the government. I felt professional engineers should get involved in government because of a lot of engineering, water and sewer and so forth, which I eventually got involved in. And then, of course, after the war, right after the war, I met my wife November 11th, 1945.
So right after you were discharged?
Right after I was discharged. And after 9 months, we were married, and we had 2 children, Alana and Mike. And I always believed in education and so forth. They both graduated college.
Nice.
And also my granddaughters both graduated from college too. And I was the first one from the family that ever through my education after high school. And been very active in VFW, DAB, American Legion, and so forth. Recently, this past Memorial Day, I walked for a mile and a half on the memorial there.
Did you?
Yeah, and I believe in physical exercise and so forth. And I think one of the reasons why I joined the Rangers was I played sports, baseball, basketball, and football, and I was always active and physical ed and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Because Darby's Rangers was, we were trained to be the best soldiers in the world.
So could you tell me about your life before the war, growing up, your family, growing up in Taunton, you know, schooling and...
Yeah, okay. Of course, I went to elementary school in Walker School.
Mm-hmm.
And for 3 years, I played basketball there. And in my 8th grade, we won a championship there. And from there, I went to Coral High School. And at Coral High School, I played baseball, football, and basketball, and I got 3 sweaters playing football.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, if I got a sweater for every sport that I played, I would have had about 7 sweaters. You only could get one for each sport.
Mm.
And from there, I worked up at Reed and Barton Silverware for a few months before I went into service. And then
How old were you when you were drafted?
I was almost 20 years old.
And so you graduated high school at 18. How was your family life? Did you all live on a farm? What kind of...
No, we lived in Taunton, which was a city. And both my parents were migrated to this country from, well, my father was born in Brazil, and my mother was born in St. Michael. And like I say, they migrated there, and my father worked in a stove company. And I have a brother, 2 brothers. My youngest brother named Tony, and my other brother, he just passed away 3 years ago. He was wounded in action too, and he received a Purple Heart and so on. And then I have a sister, so I have 2 brothers and a sister, and the sister and brother are still living.
Great. And so you were drafted, and you weren't drafted into Darby's Rangers, you were just drafted in the Army.
Yes.
And later on you decided to join up with Darby's Rangers.
Yeah.
Now, was there extra pay? What was the reasoning behind it, or did you just want to fight with the best?
I wanted to fight with the best, and actually I thought that the Darby's Rangers, I knew they went in the harm's way, and they always came back and rest more often, whereas in a regiment or troops, they were up in the front for weeks at a time. We operated a hit and miss. Well, I got hit already.
Mm-hmm. And so you went over to, where did you go? You went to Africa, and then you joined up. So did you fight before you joined up, or were you just doing training?
No, just that the convoy went to Iran, Africa, and then from there to Tunisia, and then from there I went to Italy, that's when I joined the Rangers.
And so when you joined the Rangers, what did your training consist of? Because I know it was probably pretty intense.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Well, even before breakfast, we'd go on a 5 miles speed march. Yeah, we used to do the mile in about 10 minutes. Today, I think they have to do it in 8 minutes with a combat pack. So, and that's pretty gruesome.
And so what was the first combat you saw?
Well, the first combat I saw was, well, actually the only combat I saw was about around a month. Up in the mountains there in Italy. And finally, my group was separated from the rest of the group, and there was about 30, between 30 guys. It was something like 25 killed, and there was about, I guess, 5 people.
So what was it like to be in combat, if you could describe it?
Well, the Germans had a artillery piece called the 88.
The Flak 88.
And that was one of the best military pieces, I would say, during the war. They used it as anti-aircraft, and also they used it as an artillery piece. And it was very accurate. And of course, we had artillery shells that they had a time fuse that they would go off maybe 20 feet above the ground. And during our forced march, I could see in the forest where they really used quite a bit of artillery, because a lot of the trees, you know, from the shrapnel. But we were always out on the timberline, and they really, that mountain, while we were up there, they really shelled that mountain. And finally, after a period of time, some of us got killed, and I was wounded and taken prisoner of war.
Now, what was your objective? You keep talking about this mountain in Italy. Were you supposed to take the mountain so that you said there were German artillery pieces on that mountain?
Yes, and some pillboxes. We succeeded after a period of time. I guess they succeeded after I was hit. You know? But we, like I say, we lost something. And by the way, we infiltrated through the German lines with the help of the underground, and a lieutenant would scout the area before we'd go. And we'd go in areas an area that the German wouldn't even expect us, difficult areas to get behind the lines. Like I said, with the help of the underground scouting, that's how we were able to infiltrate the German lines.
Okay. Where is this place in relation to Monte Cassino? Because I know the Monte Cassino is...
It's just before Casino, Benefro Mountain. Benefro Mountain.
Okay. And so you scaled the side of the mountain, or you...
Well, not scaled, but we managed to walk up, I guess a trail. This was during the night, you know, and of course we had mules carrying food and ammunition and all that.
Now, what kind of equipment did you carry? What kind of weapon?
I started out with a M1, and then they gave me an 03 rifle, which is one of the accurate rifles during the war. And
with a scope or no?
Yeah. And also, it was also used to launch, I forget what they call it.
Rocket-propelled grenades?
Rocket grenade. But that was one of the best rifles.
Really?
Accurate rifles.
So how were you hit? Can you kind of describe what happened?
Well, we were on the side of the mountain, and a German patrol out, you know, had us surrounded so that, you know, we either get killed or take a prisoner on. And in my case, I was wounded and I was taken prisoner on. It was some of the other guys were also taken.
And where were you hit?
I was hit right on the side here.
Shrapnel or bullet?
I believe it was a bullet at the time. Although there was a lot of shrapnel. Because when I was in the hospital, they didn't take any shrapnel out.
Now, were you dug in, or were you just?
Pardon?
Were you dug in? Did you dig in whenever you were surrounded?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
just as best
really
as you
not
could.
Then, but we would try to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, behind rocks and all that on the mountainside.
And so you said you were outnumbered 10-1.
Yeah.
So, what was it like to be a POW of the Germans? I know you said you were taken to Rome and in the hospital.
Yeah. Well,
Were the German? Did they treat you decently? How was it?
well, the Germans really respected the Americans. The Russians, they treated them like dirt. you
Right.
know. And the German civilians, they were fairly good to us. I had one guy, a young kid, he must have been 19 years old, and lost an eye over in the Russian front. And we were all sitting in the room eating, and I had my back towards the door. And he slugged me in the back, hit me back of the head. And I got up and I asked him why he did that. And he says, when I come in here, I want you to stand up. I looked at him, he was a private, and I told him, I says, we don't stand up for privates.
Did he speak English, or did you? Did he speak English, or did you speak German, or how did y'all communicate?
I picked. At that time, we picked up enough German to speak.
Oh, okay.
Broken German,
Mhm.
at least. Because I was there, almost half a year, and I stopped picking up German.
Okay.
And,
So you told him you weren't going to stand up to a private?
yeah, and he said, well, I want you guys to stand up when I come in, and he just ignored it. And he's the same guy that after I got through milking cows, there's about 15 Russian girls, Ukrainian girls, working, and I stopped in their room to talk to them, and he caught me, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And he told me to get out, and gave me hell and so forth. And I said, well, when the officer comes around, I'll tell them that you get fooled around with a woman in the main home. He started taking the rifle and took off. Then I had another guy, and he was assistant. He begged us to behave because he didn't want to go to the Russian front, you know, and because he, I don't know, we could pull the wool over his eye and all that, but because the Hofmaster, he was foreman of the community gathering, you know, of all the food and all that. And they kept some of the food, and of course, a lot of it went to the Army.
So the Red Cross boxes that you received, most of it was taken from you?
Yeah, at times. Yeah, at times. But that really helped us because...
Would you have gotten any food otherwise if they had not sent those boxes?
I think the worst time we had was on the forced march, which was really bad. And we didn't get any food, boxes at the time. We got a box once in a while. But what we would do is they used to store turnips. They used to put grass and dirt over it. That's how they stored it. Turnips, which we call them rutabagas. And while we were marching, we would see a barrel of rutabagas, and we would go, everybody would get one and eat it on the way, And one time, I cut a piece of horse rump, and I boil it with the rutabagas, and I had soup. Because the Air Force had dropped leaflets saying that they didn't want any movement, or else they'd come down. Straight, So, I mean, that's how straight hostile is and all that. But anyway, another time I really had a problem with my wrists, milking cows. So they took me to another town, Louisville, to see a doctor, and the doctor, he couldn't do anything for me. And the guy, he was an old man, he's a World War I POW. His daughter had lost an arm in Berlin way. And I didn't know whether to tell him that the doctor told me to have light work or anything like that, But I told him the truth. And he said, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it. So we got back to cubicle, and he told the hofmaster, the foreman, that I was supposed to have light work because I had problem with my hands, And that was at the time when we left the camp, that date, January 45. And he was a good man.
And what clothing did you have? Because I know it was freezing that winter. So then that March, did you have good shoes?
Yeah, we had. Oh, that's another thing. We had one thing. We had our own Army clothes through the through the Red Cross, our shoes and all that. And we had fairly good shoes, And we used to work in a dump. The manure pile with our shoes on it. The Germans couldn't understand how come we were using good shoes, But I ended up working in a dump pile barefooted,
Wow.
Which was good for your feet anyway. And I can remember when I first got out in the farm, I worked in a dump pile. And I had boils in my testicles, my stomach, and it really hurt. So I was working really slow in the dump pile, and the foreman, hofmaster, with a cane, said, "Schnell, schnell, schnell, fast, fast, hurry, hurry." And I grabbed my pocket and I said, "Klobenish, Klobenish." I said, "Hit me." I was telling clubbing. he got so excited, he told the guard, and that was when that sissy guard came up to me and said, you know how to do this and that. So at that time, they took me to another time to the doctor, and the doctor started prying out the head of the oil. And when he started doing that, I said, I'm not having any doctor working on me, and he gave me a slug, because evidently he understood English.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So I weathered that.
Oh, God.
You know, it was really, that was one of the worst parts of my prison. And during the post march, I developed a blister on my big toe, my right toe, and they couldn't put me in a hospital. So what the guys would do for me would be they would heat up some water a couple of times, you know, after a couple of days of march, and I would soak that foot in hot water, and it finally burst, and there was nothing but black and blue blood, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky that gangrene didn't set. And it was so bad that I couldn't walk, that they had me on a wagon, horse and wagon, that guards had all their food and so forth, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And every time my foot shook, it really pained.
Oh,
gosh. My best two buddies, the buddy that I mucked with, he ended up in the hospital. My other buddy lived in West Warwick, Rhode Island. And I found out that the Germans beat him up and he was paralyzed from his hips down. So I saw him once over there. And he told me what the story was, because he couldn't walk. My buddy couldn't. Some of them were lucky to go to get in the hospital. But others.
So did you make any friends, POW friends that you knew after the war?
Yeah, one of them. I had this guy I met was from Brooklyn, and he was a couple of years older than me. And we kept in contact. And, matter of fact, he passed away about 2 years ago, and helping his wife to get compensation.
That's good.
Because she filled out a form that was mostly for military retirees, which wanted to know all their income and all that. She shouldn't have filled out that part of the form because it didn't make any difference. Her disability compensation. So I'm helping her, and I'm not sure what's happening. I'm gonna check on her, call her up. My son will call her and find out. My son and I were trying to help her over there.
I'm sorry. So.
Oh, yeah. I guess,
whenever you were strafed by planes, were there any incidents? Did you have any friends that were hit by that?
No, we were lucky. We were lucky.
Would you just kind of hit the side of the road and?
Yeah. Well, we had, we used to call them bed check Charlie. Every night there'd be a plane flying around. You know, that's when the Allies really had
air superiority.
The air control, airspace control. But I remember
Well, we're gonna have to fill this some more.
during one of our first march, I saw must have been thousands of planes up in the air. I couldn't believe that the sky covered. Some would branch off to certain areas, and you could hear the bombing. Some would continue, and so on.
And were they B-17s or were they more fighter planes? Or what?
Well, they were bombers.
Okay.
Way up above. The sky was full of them. I couldn't believe it. Then one time, we were where we were on the farm. They must have had some B-17s come over. First time we had saw American planes, you know, they went up and bombed Danzig, the city of Danzig. It was supposed to be a free city. But even the Germans couldn't believe it, you know.
Yeah.
The squadron of planes.
So where were you when the war ended?
I was, we were located in a camp, a billet, I should say, between Hanover, Hamburg, and Lubeck. And that's when we were liberated by the 7th Armored Division that was supporting the British troops up in that mountain sector.
And the Germans that had you prisoner, did they
just
flee?
took off.
They just took off and they just left you there? They didn't
Yeah.
try to kill you?
Yeah. Hitler one time had issued an order to kill all special forces. But,
Wow.
I think some of the Germans respected the special forces. Now the SS is really a bad group.
Did you come across any SS soldiers?
I doubt it very much, no, because I don't know how they would treat us. Probably because one thing I always recall, and I felt real bad for these young kids. We were on post-march, and it was in March when President Roosevelt died. And they had these 15, 16-year-old kids on horses, the cavalry, going towards the front. And these kids are laughing and all that. And I says, oh my God, these poor kids, they don't know what they're getting into. Because artillery was like rain, you know.
Right.
You know? I really felt sorry for those kids.
Did you ever go up against any German tanks? Any Tigers, any Panzers?
No. Behind the mountain of Pendleton, they had a, I think it was they call it a cannon on the railroad. On the railroad. And I think it was 250 millimeters.
Wow.
But I guess it had a range of about 20 miles. You could always hear when they were. But one thing about the artillery shells, you could hear them. You could always tell how close they were.
Really?
You know?
How were the Germans fighting? Were they?
Oh, well, Rommel's, the remnant of Rommel's South Africa Corps, they were very good fighters.
And that's who you went up against in Italy?
Yeah, right. Rommel's fighters from Africa.
Wow.
And of course, Rommel was that charge of the invasion. He was caught with his pants down. He finally got killed.
Yeah. Did you ever have any hand-to-hand combat?
Pardon?
Did you ever have any hand-to-hand combat?
No.
That's
Some of the guys, we had 50 original Rangers that was in the rated DF. The first American that died in American soil, I think, was a Ranger. That's when they were organized over in the island. They had 50 Americans going with the British commandos. And, most of the British commandos were Canadians. They really took a beating.
Yeah.
We lost a lot of people in that raid.
And you were captured in Italy before Normandy invasion.
That's right, yes.
And so were you in the Normandy region, or were you in? I knew you were in France when it happened, correct?
No, not the Normandy region.
Oh, okay.
I was way up in Poland, up in East Prussia.
Oh, okay.
But the 2nd and the 5th Ranger Battalions, they were organized in the United States. The 1st Ranger Battalion was broken down into a 3rd and a 4th, and I was in the 4th Ranger Battalion. The 2nd was the ones that accompanied Rangers, was the ones that scaled
Point to Hawk.
Yeah. And that was Colonel Rudder, who eventually became the president of Texas. Texas University, I guess, Texas Aggies, I guess it was. And the 5th Ranger Battalion was headed by Colonel Schneider, who was our executive officer of the 4th Ranger Battalion. So when the Rangers were annihilated, he came back and took over the 5th Ranger Battalion on the landing. Then I had Captain Sullivan from Boston, Colonel Sullivan. He took over the 5th Ranger Battalion while they were active on land. So I met some of them through the reunion, you know.
So have you ever gone back to Italy where you once were?
No, I always wanted to go back, but I never managed to do that.
Well, thank you so much for this interview, and thank you so much for the service for our country.
Well, I hope you had enough.
Oh, I definitely did.